Hello and welcome to Not a Podcast with Celeste Mott, where I don't do a podcast, but I sometimes use YouTube to talk to practitioners that I enjoy and admire and respect. And people are always asking me to do more on YouTube, so we're doing more on YouTube. I am an occultist. I've been a practicing witch for 20 years. My full-time job is witchcraft, and I teach people how to unlock their magic. And I'm here today with two other professional spiritual practitioners and occultists. Here with me today is my esteemed colleague, Alexander Moore, the Hexdoctor. Alex didn't give me his bio, so I'm going off the top of my head to introduce Alex, and then I'm going to let him introduce himself. But Alex is a conjure worker and a Solomonic magician. He was raised in the grimoire tradition, molded by it, and is an extremely knowledgeable practitioner in an array of different subjects, including knowledge and wisdom in a traditional witchcraft place. He has several initiations, which he may or may not choose to share with you. And he has been professionally witching, professionally occulting for, gosh, what is it now? Like full time, 3+ years? But I mean,
4 years,
in terms of,
4.5.
yeah, in terms of your personal practice, though, like essentially your whole life.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, the Hexdoctor.
I'm the other half of Practical Occult at practicaloccult.com. I provide online pedagogy, teaching you how to do magic better in various different ways, for all the way from the ground up. If you've never done it at all, I got you. If you're already pretty good, I got you further in private lessons. I teach on a variety of subjects. As Celeste has said, I've trained in a variety of systems of magic across my life and very fortunate to do so. And do spell work for hire, do divination for hire, and I have spicy opinions on Instagram.
He's very good at that. And with us also is Jo'el Adifon. Jo'el did give me his bio, so I'm going to read it now. Jo'el is a practicing taumaturgo whose hijinks involve the likes of saints and wonders, vampire witches and curse wars, and real-life anime powers, which I think in this day and age where we need a little more whimsy in our lives is personally, I think, very important. Jo'el draws from his Italian origins and his West African roots and blends his extensive and eclectic studies, including an MA in clinical psychology from Columbia, with lifelong immersion in the supernatural. He is a 2021 winner of the IONS Consciousness in Action Award, and he boldly emphasizes blessing and healing, hex breaking and justice, and miracles as fun and awesome, which is one of my favorite things about Jo'el, and actually Alex too. There's a real sense of just enjoyment of living this kind of life, being in this stream of experience. People in my comments section, people who get algorithm to me, we do get a lot of, magic's not real, magic's stupid, that's dumb. But both of these human beings on the call with me today not only viscerally believe and have experienced magic as a real force in life, but they're both humbled by it and viscerally excited by it. And I think we should be viscerally excited by magic if we're going to practice it. There's, with great power comes great responsibility, but let's have some fun with it. Let's be a silly little guy sometimes, Jo'el, do you have any expansion on the wonderful and comprehensive bio you provided me with? Anything you want to tell the good people of YouTube?
I mean, I don't really have an expansion on my bio, but I just hope that if you watch this, listening to this conversation, you're getting to hear from people who live, breathe, and see this not only as a practice or a job, but our lives. And that's really what I feel like needs to happen for someone to be genuinely good at magic, is going from, oh, okay, this is a cool thing that I bumped into, versus, hey, this should be as normal to me as eating. This should be as normal to me as breathing, because that's what it takes to go from I do magic as a practice to I am magic, I am supernatural. So that's just a thought on my mind right now.
Yeah, and I think, that segues us nicely into one of the things we wanted to talk about today, and it wasn't going to be necessarily where I went first, but, this idea that magic is just a thing that you dip your toe in and dabble in, and maybe it's a phase. You're 16 in the Barnes and Noble and you pick up a book on Wicca and you do it for 5 minutes. Like, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with doing that if that's your path. A lot of people have passing interests that they graduate, from at some point and they leave it behind. But I do agree with you that I think if you're going to get good at magic, if you really want to take it to the next level, this is something that does become part of your day-to-day life. It's not like a little witch hat that you put on once a month or once a year and that's that. I mean, you can, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not necessarily going to get good.
Yeah, no, I agree. Alex, you want to jump in?
I mean, all right. The thing that always
we could see it in his face that he was ready. He was like, tell us, come on.
I was ready to jump in there. No, but what vexes me about this always is in no other aspect of our lives in the world do we not have this understanding that there is a spectrum of skill here. Like, if you want to be a musician, you can be a hobbyist musician, absolutely. But no one is going to tell you your first chair London Philharmonic, right? No one's going to tell you you're Jimi Hendrix if you're not, right? No one's going to tell you whatever. Same with physical combat sports, painting, whatever. If you're good, you're good and you work to be good. But the thing that bothers a lot of people, and this is, I think, a problem with the intersection with religion and mysticism and magic, which I believe to be a bad thing, like full stop, unless you can separate skill and craft and tech from mystical experience before you try to marry them, is there is an objective good or bad at this thing. There are practices that you should do that make you better. There are people who are straight up harder working and thus better, and more gifted and thus better, like in any other aspect of life. And the thing is, and I say this all the time to students, both private and public, this shit plays for keeps. Like, this isn't a joke when you go up high enough. I mean, there's no police for this. No one will stop you from doing bad things with this, except someone more powerful than you who actually gives a shit, of whom there are like 4 in the world who are actually going to go out there and do that kind of stuff. And one of them is fucking Jo'el Adifon. Like, let's be real.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think, again, this is something that I run into a lot, especially in the sections of the occult and witchy spaces that I tend to butt up into, because I have like a larger platform now. And so I'm reaching an audience that tends to be maybe a little bit more general interest rather than like niche occult. And you do run into people who they're interested in it. They find it exciting, but paradoxically, they don't take it super seriously. And they're like, oh, well, it's fun. I'll make a self-love jar. I'll make a, moon water, but I don't think curses are real, or like, I don't think people are really out here doing bad stuff with magic. And I find that such an odd idea to hold in your head. Why is it real for you to do like your fun little glitter and herbs spell in your bedroom, but you don't think that people are out here, as you said, like leveling up, getting really good, and then using this to hurt other people? I mean, it's real and it happens.
Well, not even just that. No, go on, Joel.
Okay, I have a theory about this. My theory, and Alex, you and I have talked about this, is the sense of stakes. Because we live in a Western world, primarily, this exists in the West, but the prevailing mindset in the West is we depend on technology, like we depend on a lot of these things, and therefore our skills in moving, the extra physical, moving the supernatural has atrophied because those resources those needs are being met in other ways. And so if you are a farmer in a rural village somewhere in the developing world, and if it doesn't rain, you die, you're gonna invest in a practitioner who can do weather magic, or maybe it runs in your family. Maybe you need to feed your village. If you are in a community where you are the head of the community and you need to essentially care for your people, and your people are going missing, if you don't activate the ability to essentially communicate with spirits and keep track of the people you love and the people under your care, then your community's fucked. So like in places where magic has real stakes, then that's the extent to where people are like, hey, I am going to invest in this because if this shit doesn't work, I'm done. And most people in the West, if you have a certain amount of wealth and you were not raised in a magical family, if you have a certain amount of attractiveness and you were not raised around magic, or you have not had a need for magic, then it's only ever going to be a hobby or a side thing. And if you don't have power, then if you don't have a desire for a hunger for power, a hunger for results, then you're not gonna have that appetite that's gonna push you to develop that. So
That's super interesting. It makes me think almost of the the Final Fantasy game series where there's the kind of constant war between tech and magic, and you'll go to areas in the game where it's like tech dominant and areas where it's magic dominant. I had never thought of it that way, but you're totally right. I mean, if you're in a rural area, in a, I know that it's not sort of PC anymore to say like second world or like, non first world country, but third world. But if you're in an area where there's not the same technological setup, the same economic setup that we have in countries like America, you're going to rely on different skill sets. You're going to need to rely on different skill sets because you don't have what we have. I think part of the reason in the West that there's this pushback against magic having stakes and magic being real is that we have the luxury to treat it like, well, this is just a funny, whimsical thing that we do, ha ha ha. You don't, like you said, have to worry about, well, half my village has gone missing. Where the hell are they? How am I going to find them? Other than to ask spirit. We have sort of other tools at our disposal. And I'd never considered it from that viewpoint. That's really interesting.
And Alex has a really good take on how even that perspective is an illusion. Like, we actually do have stakes in the West. Alex, I know you have a lot to say
we
on
really
this.
do. I mean,
yeah.
when you're applying for a job and your hiring manager is AI or someone you've never met, or when you're living in a world where, interpersonal relationships between human beings are more withered than they've ever been due to a loss of third spaces or people's gender war paranoia or all manner of problems there. If you realize that, the first world is getting more physically violent again on average, and most people aren't going to invest in the kind of weapons or combat training to keep themselves safe. Things aren't as nice or safe as they were for like the boomers, for example. And I think that's a lot of where a lot of this comes from in the first world is you had a generation or two of people who really just had like the economic fluke of economic flukes and got to be super esoteric about it without being practical. Like, for example, look at your like lodge magicians, your Golden Dawn people, your whatever. They were all well off. They didn't need anything. So they were very prone to being mystical and looking down on, quote, low sorcery or black magic as like not a necessary thing. But it's like, yeah, if you have everything, you're fine. And you still see this bleeding into people with completely full plates looking at someone snatching food like they're less than. And that's a big problem in the esoteric community. But the problem is you can't talk about that without bringing up some people will not win without magic at this point. And the thing is, look at your developing world counterpart. They fucking know. But they're like, it's not even just stakes. It's like, I'm not born to lose, homie. It's not me. Because the level of transgression that you will have if you're like Eastern European Orthodox Christian and you're going to go learn from the witch, that means something deeper there. That's like, maybe my soul is forfeit. Maybe I'm fucked. Like, but that's better than living the life that I currently live.
Yeah, like there's a serious trade. And I think there's a benefit, right, to living in the kind of society that we live in here in the United States, and on the internet, living on the internet and having accessible magical education. I mean, both of you offer classes and courses, and we'll talk about that at the end of the interview too, if you want to plug what you're doing. But both of you do that. I do that. I do. And I think it's wonderful that that's a thing that our generation grew up with a little bit more. I mean, especially as we sort of went deeper into the early 2020s. But at the same time, again, that in a way sort of creates this illusion of lowering the stakes. Like you said, if you're in rural Eastern Europe, you go learn from the witch, there's a sense of gravity to that. There's a gravitas to that, I guess. And there's not so much going on TikTok and scrolling through and seeing like who's going to teach me how to do a money bowl today. I recently, Sen Elias, who we all know on the call, we don't, not necessarily personally, but we know of. Sen Elias is a practitioner down here in New Orleans, was on the Horrible podcast. And he has a part of that interview where he talks about the initiation into witchcraft that he underwent. And he's sort of like winking, nudge, nudge, wink, wink to the audience, but he's talking about, oh, well, I had to sell my soul to the devil. And the interviewer, I love Askia, but a little more of a normie, not in like the occult space. And so there's a sort of interesting tension happening within the interview. And the comments were really interesting to me because people weren't sure how to take that. You had a lot of Christians in the comments being like, holy cow, this person just said he sold his soul to the devil. And then you have a lot of what I would call maybe beginner pagans or people at different points in their path who were pushing back against that or thought it was a joke. And it's funny because I guess to me, it is and it is not a joke. There are still stakes to initiating into certain streams of practice, spiritual currents, witchcraft. It's not a joke. This is serious stuff.
Oh, it truly is.
I would love to hear you guys talk, actually, if you feel comfortable, on initiation. Alex, if you had something to say.
Well, there's what I will say, and I'm not going to be as detailed into this, is I've been to places in the world where a bunch of people went up a mountain and about half of them came back down. Mm-hmm. When it came to, initiations into things. I've been to places mm-hmm. where it takes a lot from you and not everybody can walk away from it. I have seen, I've experienced those things. I've known other people to have experienced those things, and you do come back changed. You do come back noticeably different every time, more eldritch, if you will, every time. And, mm-hmm. You do it for the love of the game. You do it because you do it because you can't not do it. You do it because it loves you back, that kind of thing. And that weird, said at the risk of sounding grotesquely mythopoetic, in that weird, like, this is who I am, this is what I must do type of way. But the thing is, there is that growing distinction between you and everyone who hasn't done that thing. And even within that, you and other practitioners who just aren't willing to go there. Like, I was talking to a dear person to me who's not who wasn't talking about this in magical terms, but like, it's that whole, I've been trained harder than I train people. I've been trained more brutally than I trained people, because that's not really for everybody. And I'm not saying it should be, by the way, but I am saying that the problem with the larger conversation is the lack of knowledge that it is that thing, that the monster movie shit is all real. And I mean, all of it is real. And if you don't think so, because you've never walked outside of your suburban, housing plan into the world, who've never like gone boots on the ground and seen it, that's not my feeling. That's yours entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jo'el, go ahead. Yeah.
And I want to also talk about, when we talk about initiation, there's the willful initiation, which a lot of us, all three of us have experienced in some form. But then there's also what happens when people become folkloric horrors via contagion. What happens when someone receives power and it takes them over? Like, I've seen this. I've seen what happens when small children, receive power and it are basically ridden by certain parasitic beings to do very, very strange and evil things, and have gone up against that. So I think there's a lot of people who may be viewing, our craft and our field with a certain amount of, like this, like I want the shiny thing. But every time you look at a sense of initiation, you got to look at, okay, first and foremost, is this current compatible with me? Am I willing to do what it takes on a value judgment perspective to conform myself to become congruent with this current. There's a whole bunch of questions and reference points and parameters that people need to have in place before they go in front of a current or a house or initiatory system to decide, hey, is this for me? And a lot of people, and I can speak to this particularly in the, African traditional religion background, or the, African diasporic tradition background. Like, I am not initiated in any African traditional religions. However, I've seen both the positive and the negative. And there's a lot of people who are not on the continent and have not seen some of these things, and who are trying to reclaim themselves and have this perspective of, oh, it's all roses if it's come from Africa. And I'm here to tell you that ain't true. It's really not true.
Would you be comfortable, Jo'el? It's totally fine if not, but would you be comfortable sharing like an anecdote or a story of something you have seen? Like when you're saying, I think initiation by contagion is really interesting to me, and I don't really hear people talking about it. Would you be willing to share something that you have seen in that regard?
I will. So the full story is one that will come in the future. Alex knows the story. He's seen some of it. Celeste, you'll see some of it. You'll hear about it at some point. But basically what I can say is I have seen certain covens and certain initiatory systems tied to West African traditions, who specifically, they will prey on people who are going through a hard time or who are sick. And those also prey on children, and they will essentially feed them a certain amount of power and connect them to a certain amount of spirits, that these spirits thrive on violence. They thrive on essentially vampiric in a literal sense, both on an energetic and also blood. And these people are basically forcibly connected to them because these spirits will prey on your secret hopes, your secret dreams, your secret desires. And essentially, you get child soldiers, you get children who, let's say, you're at school and you're being bullied, and a kid says, hey, when we go to sleep, I'll take you to this meeting in this the astral plane, and you'll get power and you can stand up to your bullies. Well, if you're a kid who's you've been bullied, or if you're a kid and you've been in a certain situation, or if you're in a highly competitive environment where your education, your schooling, and where you rank is like really important, you might take the deal. And I've even seen children who, were bright kids who were basically studying at a highly competitive level, go to exams and fail, only to realize later that it was their, child that they didn't know. It was like their friend who was cursing them because the spirits that they were possessed by, ridden by, and packed with, were like, no, we need this chaos energy to happen. And a lot of vampiric witchcraft traditions, whether they're in West Africa, whether they're in a lot of different places all over the world, there are people at the top who are benefiting from that energy. And you, Celeste, you're somebody about cults that exists in the witchcraft world, and especially where real power is concerned, people need to be careful. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think, I work a lot with clients one-on-one, as do both of you, and I think all of us have seen clients, even here in America, right, who will come to us and tell us a story of, I did not, knowingly initiate into anything, but something is now attached to me, or I have been sort of absorbed into a spiritual situation that now feels like I'm in over my head. And people think, initiation, well, that's just a conferral or a conference of power. And I've now kind of been bopped on the head and like knighted, and I can practice whatever, and I have the power to do whatever, and I have the license to go off and speak about this thing or teach about this thing, whatever the tradition might be. But that initiation, sometimes it happens without you knowing. Sometimes it happens, and yeah, like you said, you get a little taste of the power, but there is a huge cost for that power, and really you're just being fed to something. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've had a client, like many times over my career, a client who said, oh yeah, I started going to this botanica and then they gave me a pot. I don't really know what it is, but they gave me a pot and it's in my house now. And I'm like, oh, that's not good, like what? And it's common. It's not rare. I feel like these are normal people that are coming to me with these stories. They're not occultists even. They're like regular folk, and they've got a pot in the bottom of their closet for 5 years gathering dust, and they don't know what's in there. They weren't told,
Oh, absolutely.
Thoughts?
I mean, this stuff happens. This stuff happens in America and all over the place. I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't happen. And here's the thing. It doesn't happen as much, but also it isn't as known, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing is, and I've known people who trained in some pretty diabolical strains of magic. Because, full disclosure, I've had some evil teachers in my life, and I've talked to people who trained alongside me. Like, yeah, I learned all the goofy magic, and I moved to the most secular, atheistic, or New Age community. That's a lot of things. A lot of really diabolical sorcerers rebrand themselves as New Age influencers. A lot of your manifestation gurus on YouTube who are like, oh, they're MLM energy vampirizing a whole shit tons of people because they're like, it's a target rich environment. Everyone has these stupid fucking beliefs that they can't be cursed, or that if I just don't allow it in, it can never hurt me. And like, get the fuck out of here. But you know what I'm saying? Like, but they do that and they know. And I've talked to these people directly who are like, no, I'm about to fuck people up. Like I am here to misbehave. And
Yeah.
You're like, shit. I mean, and they're candid about it because, as I said before, who's going to stop them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no cops for this, right?
No.
Jo'el is the cop for this. I'm kidding. Joel's not a cop.
I mean,
Joel's not a cop, everybody. Joel's not a cop.
Definitely not.
Let me ask you guys, because this came up actually in my comments section earlier today, maybe yesterday. I had a spicy take, quote unquote, a couple of weeks ago where I said, initiation by spirit is a real thing, which is a sort of divisive topic in the occult community. Again, if people are watching and they're like, what are you guys even talking about? Initiation is essentially a process that you undergo where something is given to you essentially, and you are changed in some way. That's a real blanket definition of initiation. And obviously that happens in secular ways as well as in mystical, religious, and spiritual ways. But in the communities that we all move in, the idea that a spirit can initiate you separate from any other human beings is really controversial because it ties into this really, really thorny topic of conversation that we're going to get to of cultural appropriation. And people don't like the idea that maybe a spirit could give you an initiation into, quote unquote, a closed practice. There's this feeling that it must be human to human conference of initiation. And for me, this is a really nuanced topic. When I say initiation by spirit is real, I'm not discounting the importance of initiation by group or initiation by culture or initiation by teacher and mentor. I'm just saying it does happen. So I would love to hear what both of you think about the idea of initiation by spirit directly.
Yeah, I have an interesting question to follow up. Where did the people who got these traditions, where did they get them from initially? Because people act like that's not the case, right? They're like, oh, there's always been a line of succession. So where did the initiators get their initiation from? They got it directly
originally
from spirit. And and that's the thing for me is initiation by spirit will always produce results. So there will always be manifestations that occur with it. So let's say someone Alex, you're familiar with this, like in Peru, they are like, okay, did a shaman get struck by lightning? You know what I mean? Like they talk about like various things and they have like various things to track. In a lot of old traditions around the world, they have understandings that, hey, if someone was initiated by spirit, their life will look other than. It's not going to look the same as a normie. Like you can't live action role play. You can't LARP it. Like, you're going to be visible. And I think that, yes, there is something to the effect of, traditions and community that are preserving the integrity of a tradition and a lineage so people can kind of know. But then you have spirit, and spirits do whatever the fuck they want a lot of times. They don't always look at skin
Mm-hmm.
color. They don't always look at lineage. They don't always look at tradition. They don't always look at ancestry. They're just like, oh, this person will be a conduit for better, for worse, for whatever agenda the spirit has, that may be for the person, the initiate, its benefit, or maybe for the benefit of a community. Sometimes the spirit can do whatever the fuck they want, and I think that's important to acknowledge.
Alex, what's your thought?
So it's a complicated, nuanced thing. So Joel's absolutely right that a lot of these things have genesis. I mean, take the Watchers producing the Nephilim. If that isn't an initiation by spirit, I don't know what that is. That's initiation by insertion. You know what I mean? No, but in general, but truly, there are layers, right? Like Lee Morgan talks about this in A Deed Without a Name, and I think he actually does a really good job of mentioning this. Like, there are people who are like, oh, I had an imaginary friend who isn't so fucking imaginary, and I still have him, and I'm 33 years old, and he teaches me secrets. Initiation by spirit. Now, grimoire magic. You do the thing, you summon the spirit, it teaches you things, it gives you familiars, it gives you all sorts of stuff. Cool. A person initiates you into a system. Now, there are some spirits that will go rogue and will give other people the things, and if you haven't produced actual results of what you've been shown, it's fake. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so divisive, because on the online, occult community, you can just say whatever. This is still an example of, I believe in your superpowers if you believe in mine, until you meet people in person, until you see people do their thing, until you really get the proof. And you should always seek for the proof. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes and I think any established occultist who has had a number of initiations given by people will then begin to have more initiations directly by spirit. And for whatever reason, and I don't say for whatever reason, we don't question those people because they were pedigreed in, in the legitimate way. So they get their flowers, and it's like, oh yeah, you're in voodoo and Bon and all these other things. Well, of course you can transmit a Ganesh puja by talking to the spirit directly. Now, I will say that's not wrong. Like, as silly as that sounds, that's not wrong. If a person within multiple traditions generates spirit contact, does all sorts of stuff, that's cool. A very popular example is Jason fucking Miller and his Hecatear. That shit just came to him, but he had commensurate training and whatnot to be able to receive, right? I think that's the thing. If you're a good receiver, that's why, like in the case of Celeste, those who dream true, those who dream deep, they can be shown things in their dreams and even bring physical objects back. Like, if that isn't a fucking initiation, I don't know.
We can't have that conversation. It got so divisive over on Reels. People were so mad about that one. I'm a grifter now because I dared to suggest that there's spiritual texts that speak about this happening. I didn't even say I had done it. I just said that it's a thing people write about. But apparently, that makes me a grifter.
If you make money, you're a grifter.
That's right. Capitalism is the greatest grift of all, is really the bottom line. That's the name of this episode. But that is a joke. That's a joke. Alex's mouth opened. He was like, oh, it's fine. No, but I think, like, you're absolutely right. And I think one thing I do want to say, because we are skirting the territory now, we're kind of wading into the wading pool of cultural appropriation. But I think the benefit of initiation by person into a lineage, right? And Alex kind of touched on this just now, is that there is a case to be made for having practitioners, especially if you're someone who wants to learn from someone, who have a provable pedigree. There's problems with it as well. But if you're going out there and you want to learn something, maybe you do want to know that someone's put in the time 20 plus years and they've learned from someone who learned from someone who learned from someone, and they can kind of show you their resume in that regard, and they're not just like some guy under an underpass who's like, I can talk to spirits, let me help you. Like, maybe we want to know that there's some sort of educational background that someone's gone through. So I think that's one reason that initiation into a tradition or a learning group or a house, whatever you want to call it, can be helpful. I think the other reason is that initiation by spirit is very intense and it can cause psychosis. You know,
Mm.
I would say, you know, not always, but I would say like a measure of instability is part of initiation, period, but especially initiation by spirit if you're out there on your own doing it. And so having a group, a working group, a house, a tradition, a culture who can hold you in that and give you a system of checks and balances, give you people who have been through that process before to talk to, there's a benefit to that in terms of keeping you safe and keeping your community safe.
Yeah. One last thing I want to talk about regarding initiation is a lot of people and a lot of us, we have been trained and conditioned to exotify initiations in other cultures and to devalue our own. Case in point, Catholicism, right? Like there is this whole thing where people are like, oh, you know, I was raised Catholic and, you know, then I went to other stuff. And look, no shade on people who have been hurt by Catholicism and hurt by forms of Christianity and all that. However, if one can take a step back from that pain and deal with it and you know put it in its right context, there is a huge current of power in the Catholic tradition that we don't have as much time to go into in this call, but yeah, that's something I want to mention, that folk Catholicism and Catholicism is like a big stream of power that can be wielded.
100%. And that's an initiation. You're totally right. This is when people use that word. I think oftentimes they think that it has to be into a practice like voodoo or into a practice like, you know, an ATR of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without wanting to like get hyper specific and mention names, you know, Palo, Ifa, whatever. But Catholicism is an initiation. Being baptized is an initiation. Like, we don't think of it that way, but it is. Getting your Reiki certification is an initiation. You're being given an energy is being passed on to you and you're being trained how to use it. That's an initiation. So I want to ask about, oh, you go ahead, Alex. I thought you might want to weigh in.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I agree with that. And I also would say in terms of people exotifying other traditions, this is a thing that I have been saying lately that people don't love to hear but can't prove me wrong on. We have everything in the West that you need. You know, honestly, people will say this a lot, like, well, you know, I need this, I need that. And again, having teachers is great. But if you really just had yourself, Franz Barden's first book, any grimoire, literally any one, like even the Arbitel, which is super easy to do, and then a system of folk magic with like candle magic, like the Master Book of Candle Burning, or like any of the 50, you know, hoodoo manuals out there that you can piece together. If you really wanted to be self-taught and have everything from astral training, spirit work, folk magic, animism, all the way down, all of those things exist. They weren't, for the longest time, exactly put together publicly. But if you look at the history, they were. Like Beverly Pascal Randolph, I believe is the name I'm thinking of. That dude did everything. It's like, oh yeah, I do grimoires, yeah, I do conjure, yeah, I do astral stuff, I do everything. He did everything, and he was taught everything. Like there have been groups of people that will do that, and then you can do it on your own. But the exoticism comes from the fact that, frankly, we're taught to hate what we have, and we're taught that other people's exotic stuff is different. But here's the thing: let's say you go get initiated in Nepal or in Haiti or somewhere, and you're taught to use an entire pharmacopoeia that you don't have access to in Maine. Like, what good is that to you at that point? You know, like at that point, like yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think we're kind of we're wading into the waters. But so the topic, obviously, of cultural appropriation comes up a lot in certain subsets of online spaces, and you know, we're talking about initiation. We're talking about, you know, as you just said, you know, we have everything we need in the West. If you really wanted to just learn Western traditions or traditions that come from that place, you know, you have it. You have a full system of magic at your disposal. Alex has an amazing course, actually, that he teaches that really from the ground up can build you a magical system that has everything. You will learn everything you need. And I say this not to say that you shouldn't go explore other things if you are someone who wants to do that, but just to say, you know, yeah, you don't need to go co-opt an exotified or marginalized tradition. That you don't have to do that. It's not necessary. But where does the line fall with appropriation? I mean, Alex, you just used the word conjure, and there are people who would say, conjure is not for white people, right? Like his mouth twitched. He's ready. What would you say if someone said, you can't do conjure because you're white?
Well, I guess you haven't met me, but at the same time, like, so first of all, here's the thing that's about that. There are three answers to that question. One, yeah, you can, because there are books and classes out there taught by and written by, Black people, and you can buy them and you can learn the thing. You can do the thing. It is literally a thing you can buy and learn and do, provided you will practice and do what you do. There are teachers you can pay either publicly or for one-on-one training that are these things. But also, like, what about someone like, for example, Charles Porterfield, Jewish guy taught by a Black person, several Black people? Does his training not count because he's like genetically removed by one generation, or can he still pass on a skill set and a craft? Of course he can. So, like, when you're looking at that, find good teachers, find good pedagogy always, and it can be yours. And I think the funny thing about this, because I remember asking my very first conjure teacher this quickly before she died, not too terribly long ago, and I asked her, like, what do you think about that? And her response was, if you have the gift, you can conjure, is what she said. And unless someone can take it from you, it belongs to you. Like, if you earned it and you can hold it, it's yours always. But the thing is, even with her door was open to anybody who had the gift and wanted to learn. My goth white ass walked in that door season after season, never had a problem. No one who looked like her did. They were scared, just in that particular community. So, like, what is it not mine? I had to reshingle that woman's roof once. Like, I earned that shit. But also, like, you don't need to work that hard to earn it at this point. You can pay for private tutelage. You can not even just books. You can go call an elder. You can go pay for private sessions with people who do these things, and they'll teach you because their bills need to be paid too. And the thing is, like, it's the same with anything even extrapolated outward. Like, you can go to Haiti and get initiated. Well, will you get scammed with some people, some houses? Sure, you got to be discerning. Can you go find various houses and get initiated? Sure. Obviously, you need to be very careful. I think the thing is, people have this goofy illusion that everyone who does an exotic, for lack of a better word, practice is like the woman in the wolf sweater in the 1990s at a community college saying she's 1/16th Cherokee. Like, that's not what this fucking is. Like, these are people who are like, I've gone and done the thing. And normally, in my experience, it's the people who haven't worked hard at the thing criticizing you for straight up being better at it and not looking like them.
I think it's also tricky, right? Because, as you said, there's a lot of people in the US and outside of the US who offer the knowledge for those who are going to come and seek them out and do the work for it, right? Either the labor for it or pay for it, because it can be a pay-to-play model. And just because it is a pay-to-play model doesn't make it invalid. It's very, very common in ATRs, especially outside of the US and inside, to pay for your initiation. It doesn't make it a scam. This is just the way the system is set up. But I feel like there's this sense of what do I want to say here? There's a sense that I see this in my comments a lot. You need to go back to your Ancestry DNA test, basically, and like look at where your Ancestry DNA test, where the feds who like took all your DNA to test it, where they've put you on the map. And someone in my very, very sincere, lovely person in my comments the other day said, when you do next talk about this, can you please tell me, I'm new at this, how much of my ancestry needs to be from a place for me to be able to like go look at that tradition. And I thought to myself, this is skirting so dangerously close to blood quantum. Like, we're now going to have to look at, are we like, how many percentages of a DNA have we got in a particular area to be able to go knock on the door of a teacher? Like, I think people rarely see the side of this argument that actually points us towards separatism and frankly white supremacy. I probably can't say that on YouTube. We'll see what happens. But you know, you're funneling people into a system and a worldview that is going to wind up creating extremism, essentially, by enforcing these ideas that you have to go back to a DNA test, you know. And I mean, if I went back to my DNA test and I only practiced what was, or learned what was in there, how far back do we go? I mean, a lot of my ancestors are from Shetland, the Shetland Islands in Scotland, like a huge percentage. That's where most of it comes from, actually, which was a surprise to me. I don't have any living relatives in the Shetland Islands. I've never been to the Shetland Islands. I have ancestors that I can trace who are buried in graveyards over there, but do I need to go back to Shetland and find a teacher on the Shetland Islands in order to be doing this correctly, you know, and not stepping on anyone's toes? And I find that to be sort of like a strange and reductive take. But I would love to hear both of you speak on that. But like, Jo'el, you know, we've been yapping over you for a while, so I would love your thoughts.
Oh no, y'all are good. I have two thoughts. One, PGM. If you look at the PGM in a time where we were living in a more Greco-Roman unified society, not too dissimilar from the time we're in now, because the PGM was connected by intercultural exchange, and with the internet, we've kind of almost gone into a time where a lot of that kind of magic is more common. There were plenty of people who were like, yeah, like I'm down with Helios and I'm down with Archangel, you know, San Michele, and I'm down with, like, you know, all these various things. The difference between someone who's like a PGM type magician or like a Jason Miller or like, you know, people similar to us is that we acknowledge these things as real and we engage the power as real and it produces effects. And I think there's a sense of respect that's inherent when you have a magical practice that is effective, because you're essentially like, no, these spirits are real. I have a dialogue. I have a working relationship with them. And there's a call and response. For a lot of people who are going around collecting things, like collecting initiations or collecting like practices like Pokemon, they're like, ooh, this seems cool. It doesn't really produce anything in their lives. You know, there's no real, you can't look at their lives and be like, oh, I can tell that this spirit has blessed you, or I can tell that this saint, or I can tell that this deity has done this, because I look at your life and I'm like, I can look at things that on paper maybe you shouldn't have because they're out of your league, but for the hand of the divine or the hand of a spirit wrenching reality. And I also want to talk about, I'm an example of what happens when you have someone who is an ancestral product of one culture, but then is a spiritual product of another and is merged together. And, you know, like my ancestry is obviously like West African, Beninese to be exact. And I have a lot of, you know, gifts and things that I've inherited from ancestors there. I also have a deep, you know, Catholicostal, you know, magic that runs through me. And that was made because certain generations of my ancestry were like, you know, this Jeshua dude, these saints, fuck with that. Let's try that out. And that led to me, you know what I mean? And if you go solely by ancestry, then what about the land? What about the land that welcomed you? What about the spirits that agreed to have you be born at a specific time, at a specific place? What about past lives? Not to sound like the, you know, I was Cleopatra in a past life, but going back to power, I always look at it. If when someone's like, oh, you know, Jo'el, like I had this vision the other day and this fucking octopus came to me and said I'm from the planet Zarbon, you know, I'm like, I don't know about that. But if they all of a sudden open their hand and an octopus comes out, I'm like, oh shit, all right, well, damn, maybe you are from the planet. Exactly, maybe you are from the planet Zarbon. I don't know. Like, it to me, it comes down to, can they demonstrate? Can they show? Does reality agree with you? And look, now I gotta preface that, because if you do get crazy enough in this thing and in this reality and in this magic, you can make reality agree with you, but that's another level. That's a different conversation.
That's next time on the podcast, right? Is a
No,
good
but
one.
so, I would say in addition to that, once again, we hold a certain standard for magic that we don't hold for anything else. And people love to talk about being an animist. So what? You can't study Muay Thai kickboxing because you're not Thai? Are you telling me there's not a spirit attached to that? Are you telling me there's not a spirit attached to jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu? I can't play the blues on guitar. I can't, I can't watch and adore anime because I'm not that thing. I think that if you find a culture that is within your DNA and it speaks to you and you're like, yeah, this works for me, great. If something calls to you that's far away, again, in only in magic do we hold this back for whatever reason. And I would honestly insist anyone listening to this who's like kind of on the fence, remember, in magic, there will always be people who are trying to take your power from you. And anyone who tells you you can't do a thing is trying to take your power from you. Now,
in some way,
again,
yeah.
I'm not saying you should just snap your fingers and be like, oh yeah, I'm the high initiate, blah blah blah, because I chose to be. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is if the path is open to you to train and people are willing to give it to you, if you earn it, then don't let anyone tell you you're the wrong whatever for that thing, because they're just, because again, look at the lives of the people who are saying this too. Like I will be that guy to be spicy and point that out. I rarely see a genuinely powerful elder in a tradition. I've maybe once in my life, and that was a dude who believed that unless you had melanin in your skin, you could not do magic, which is foolishness. But like, he believed that with his whole heart. He was great at magic. It was the only guy I've ever seen who was like, no, I will only open my door to dark-skinned black people, was his thing. And I was like, all right, well, that's cool. But no one else. I mean, I've talked to elders, and I've been fortunate enough to have dialogue with elders in a bunch of traditions globally. None of them care. They care if you can do the work.
Yeah. I think the thing is too, like, and Joelle, you touched on this just before as well. There's so many like intersecting parts of this. Like part of it is going to be, who are your ancestors? I'm certainly not here to say that your ancestral lineage is not important. I mean, I think ancestors and who they are and what they can teach you, those are the spirits, arguably, for most people that are closest to them, that are going to be maybe the easiest to work with. Again, to reference Sen Elias in the Horrible podcast interview, he says, God's busy. Your ancestors are right there and they're going to fight for you. God doesn't care if you got like your face pushed into the mud and your sandwich stolen in class today, probably very much. Your ancestors are going to go into bat for you. So ancestor work is important. Looking at who your ancestors were, learning about that, looking into those traditions, I think has a lot of value. But then in America, and I can say this too, because I'm not from here, there's an obsession, I think, with this weird sort of ancestral purity, and it often comes from people who have never been to the countries that they're claiming this sort of strong association with. I've had people speak over me as someone who was born and raised in the United Kingdom about like British, Irish, and Scottish traditions, all of which, these are places I've been. They are places that I grew up. They are places that I have not like distant ancestors, but ancestors like one generation back. I am the ancestor. I was born on that land and raised on that land. And people want to start lecturing me about, you're going about it the wrong way. Baby, you've never been there. Like, Joelle, you said the spirits in your lives, the spirits who are in your crew, your pit crew, whatever you want to call it, they potentially choose how you're going to incarnate and where you're going to be born. So in that respect, the fact that I was born on the land in the UK is important. Now, I will say it's difficult being a citizen of a global society, as we all are, where diaspora occurs and people relocate more than they used to. I was like ripped from my ancestral homeland at age 10 and planted in Australia, which I feel very little spiritual connection with, by the way. And that's why I got out of there as fast as I fucking could and came to New Orleans, which I do feel a spiritual connection with. But being on the land in a place is important too. Each one of us is living in a locale where we have relationships with the spirits of the land in our locale. We have places that we go. areas that we work magically that we have built relationship with. And that's not nothing either. I went back to the UK in 2023 after, I think it had been like almost 10 years since I had visited. And even though that's my homeland and I have roots there, and it's a place that is deeply and profoundly connected to me spiritually, I didn't have, I guess, as many spiritual experiences as I was hoping for. I was thinking it was going to be like balls to the wall 3 weeks of just like crazy, like cinematic level magical experiences. And I had some, but it wasn't this sort of level that I expected. My dreams were very quiet while I was there. And I remember talking to a colleague and a friend, my friend Jess from Aconite Conjure, while I was there. Jess lives in Wales and has been there pretty much her whole life. And I was kind of kvetching about it. I was like, I'm just pissed off that I'm not like having amazing fairy dreams while I'm here in my ancestral homelands. And she was like, babe, they don't know you. Like, when were you last here? When did you, like, when you were 10, were you working the land magically? Were you a practicing witch at 10 years old? And of course, the answer is no. You know, was I there as a magical person, as someone who has always experienced magic and the supernatural in my life? Yes. But at 10 years old, I wasn't going out to the crossroads in my tiny English village and working the crossroads. So yeah, of course the spirits of that place are they're present and there's a recognition, but they're not looking at me like, oh, hey, homie, yeah, we're gonna, like, we're best buds. Because have I been giving them offerings? No, I've been on the other side of the world. So I think that there are so many ways that this intersects. Initiation by human being is one of them, you know, initiating into a tradition and learning from people who are within that cultural tradition, and that has value and it's important. But then there's also initiation by spirit, and then there's also ancestral ties, and then there's also growing up on the land, being born on the land, and then there's also the land that you're on now and that you work, which ties back to Alex's earlier point about availability of materia, availability of, you know, things that you might want to use for your practice. I do a lot of British traditional witchcraft, but is there a blackthorn tree anywhere in New Orleans? No. Where's a fucking blackthorn tree in the swamp? There's not one, you know? So you kind of have to adapt, I think, as a global citizen. That was a long rant. I'm sorry.
Nah, hey, don't apologize. That was dope. As you were talking, I thought about, you know, a story that, you know, I definitely want Alex to share because I feel it's so relevant in the magical world. And we talk about stakes, we talk about power, and we talk about how, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, there's a magical Darwinianism that exists where there's certain people that the only language they speak is might makes right. And, you know, there's people who are training every day to be the most unhinged that they can possibly be, to win at any cost they possibly can. And there's certain people who are, you know, occult enthusiasts, or maybe they're beginner magicians, or maybe they're even a little bit competent, but who are essentially about their political values first. I'm not saying that's right and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just stating that as a reality, and not realizing that puts you as a disadvantage of people who are like, no, I am first and foremost about magical power, about the supernatural, about growing. And some of these people, when you come across them and you pop off at them, they got time. And Alex, my older bro, has a really good story about one such case.
I want to hear this too, and I want to preface by saying I think this ties us nicely back to where we started the discussion too, which is, you know, the idea that this is very real. This is not you know, playhouse doll time in the Magic Academy where we just, like, you know, again, make our little jars and do our, you know, wave some incense around. Like, this is a practice and a wider world and a community where the stakes are high, and there you are going to run into people on the internet. You might not realize it because they might be behind an, you know, a no profile picture, ridiculous screen name, but you're going to run into people in this community who are the thing, and they know what they're doing, and you got to be a little careful about who you're popping off at. Which, Alex, we give you the floor on that one.
So I've seen a lot of examples of what I'm about to describe. This one really was like one of the earliest ones I've seen. It was in one of the early forums, like wizard forums, that kind of thing. Like early, not to be confused with like Wizards of the Coast forums, but like, early like occult forums. This dude who was like a Bokor, that was his whole thing. He would talk about like Haitian sorcery and whatnot, and he was spicy. He was a spicy guy, and I'm summarizing the story because it's a bit longer, but he's a spicy guy. One woman, she took umbrage, we'll say, with his spiciness, and he went, "I'm gonna curse you, and you're gonna die in 3 days."
Mm.
And everyone was like, "All right, bullshit, whatever." Well, now of course it wasn't the exact day that we found out because the internet, whatever. But there did come a point where it was like, no, she did die. Proof was shown, the whole 9 yards. It was like, no, she died when he said she would, the way he said she would.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember seeing that, and again, I was no stranger. I grew up in this. I know how real it can be, but I remember seeing that and going, damn, like just like that. And again, this was like we're talking about like no picture, no name, no birthday, no natal chart, kind of stuff. Sometimes people can just reach out astrally and get you.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, and like I said, this is a summarization of a longer story. But the thing is, this is not the only time I've seen this. It's not the only time this has happened. And one thing I say in my very first protection course is like, don't be putting your natal chart out there for everyone. Why are you doing that? Why would you do that? Like, here's my big 3 and my whole natal chart, and someone's like, hell yeah.
Yeah, and to that end, if you're going to get an astrology reading with someone, vet everyone that you work with. This is, I think, my major takeaway, even to go back to the initiation discussion, is you should be using discernment and vetting the people that you work with spiritually, because there are people out there who either aren't good and you're going to waste your time and your money, or there are people out there who are, a little bit nefarious, and there's a black market for natal charts. If you are going to the wrong person and trusting them with your natal chart information. I mean, when I work with clients to do spell work, I will ask them for their natal chart information, and part of the reason for that is that it is a link that you can use to do spell work. If you're doing spell work, for a friend, if you're watching this and you are curious, if you're doing spell work for your mom because she's sick, you can use her natal chart to target that work. But I always tell my clients, hey, it would be great to have this if you are comfortable, because it does help me target the work. If you're not comfortable, I completely understand. Do not feel you have to send it to me. Because I lived with a roommate who was an occultist for years, and I've never seen his full natal chart, and he will probably never give it to me because he's a man who understands the importance of privacy. And, he's not taking any chances. It's not that he doesn't trust me personally. That's just his policy, is I'm not going to give that out, So vet your practitioners, make sure they're coming recommended by people that you already have established some trust with, and don't give your natal chart out to pretty much anybody. Certainly don't be just putting it up on the internet. Make it hard for people to find, in the same way that you wouldn't advertise your home address to everybody on the internet, So it's kind of like that, I feel like. I guess, unless we have any last minute things, I'm going to.
Oh, I got one last thing.
Oh, Joel's got to say,
anybody who's watching this and just got some really fucked up ideas connected to me or connected to Alex or connected to Celeste or anybody we know or any innocent person, Holy Ghost fire.
There you go.
Nice. So we're covered now. It's fine. Yeah, look, I think I don't want to keep you guys forever. I mean, I could keep talking to you for a long time, but I don't want to keep you when you probably have evening plans. I certainly did want to talk about, I mean, if you have a minute, the concept of LARPing, since it's kind of related. Oh, a minute, he says. I'll talk about LARPing. I mean, I think the Bokor story it segues us nicely into that, because from what I understand, and I had heard the story from Jo'el before you shared it here on the Not podcast, but it sounds like this other person on the forum who lost their life was kind of really pushing this guy and kind of being, needling, disrespect. And that's the thing. I mean, some people will just some people will just pop off at you because they're going to pop off at you. But some people, you know, why are we, if you think magic is real and you think that people really can use it, and someone has told you that they have, you know, some authority in that space, whether that would be by initiation or whatever, why are you testing that person? You know, like, you're really telling us, I think, at that point that you don't think this is real. Because if you really thought that this person had the chops, you would not be needling them and harassing them, probably. So where does, for people who are listening and might not know LARP, you know, live action role play, where does this concept of LARPing fit into the occult community? People who are play acting, I guess, at magic or at being initiated or whatever it might be, but they don't actually do the work.
Well, I mean, so again, as with all this, it takes many forms, right? This can be the, you know, I worship the old gods, TM. You know the ones. They're so old. They're the oldest gods, older than yours. And like, that's cool. But then you're like, okay, what's your practice look like? And they won't be like, oh, here's my book of stave spells, or here's my, you know, wrangle staff, or here's my fucking, like, you know, nail of regret. They'll just be like, oh, you know, I skull for Odin once or twice a week and I'm protected. Or the people who are like, I'm divinely protected because I'm in my divine
Yes.
feminine. And you're like, all right, cool. Or even people who are like, you know, oh, I'm Christian and Jesus can protect me against everything and anything. Like, frankly, spicy take, no, can't. Like, unless you got that real hookup, which 99.99% of Christians don't, never will, because it is a system of magic. Religion is dumb. Magic is cool. I straight up gonna say it. Like, it's a system of magic that if you can't work, it will not save you.
Real quick, just to
These
clarify,
are the views of Alexander Moore.
Right, I probably should have said this at the beginning of the podcast, but this is a roundtable discussion. We don't all necessarily agree 110% on everything, but we do very dearly love our brother and friend Alexander Moore. So, you know, we just the disclaimer. But yeah,
at the same time,
I mean,
people don't agree, but tell me I'm wrong. Look at how many people will pray for salvation and be destroyed in physical accidents, for example. That means your tech is failing. That means it's wrong. Does that mean Christian magic doesn't work? No. But there's a reason why we have the saints and angels and psalms and various things. Frankly, going directly to Jesus, oftentimes, with exceptions, but oftentimes doesn't fucking work as well as the other stuff. And does the same thing with all sorts of...
He's pretty busy. Like, that's, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier. He's a busy guy. Like, you might want to have some other people that are running your concerns up the chain. I like saints personally, but that's just me.
As do I. Fuck with the good saint spell. Love me a novena. But here's the thing. So when it comes to LARPing, it's this, I have no proof of concept, but I'm going to assume that everything I believe that makes me feel good is true, right? I'm going to assume that because I am, you know, sitting here with my altar, my little pagan altar, my little whatever, and I'm untested, and there are these things that make me feel good, and maybe I've read online that they have personalities that are surprisingly modern in their ideology. You know, I'm looking at everyone who has a Lilith practice. It's like, she's a feminist icon. Cool, that's awesome, bro. I'm looking at everyone who's like, oh, Loki is exactly like he is in the Marvel TV series. All right, homie, like, that's cool. Fuck the Scandinavians I've talked to who are like, that thing is insane and dangerous. Like, I guess boots on the ground people don't matter. Like, that's what I mean. That's LARPing to me. LARPing is like this. This isn't real. It's all just a game. But also, I simultaneously am super invested in the belief system I've created that facilitates everything I want to be true and challenges me in no way.
Jo'el, what are your thoughts?
Damn, I love when my older bro gets spicy. Yeah, so I feel like for me, when it comes to LARPing is dangerous. And LARPing is also tragic because I feel like it insults the people who died. Like, I know people who were very good Christian people, very good Catholic people, very good people of many different religions. who went to, were faced with real danger and lost their lives simply because, like, there's a verse, I believe it's in Hosea. Don't like cancel me, Bible people, but it basically says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And I
Mm,
believe that is like true in so many different cases where, and unfortunately, the spirit realm, spirit world, the supernatural can be unforgiving, where you
mhm,
could be a kind and good-hearted person. You could be a person who was there for people. You could be a person who puts yourself on the line, but you didn't have the right tech. You didn't have the right stuff in place, and you meet a force that is bent on taking your life, and it takes your life. I
mhm,
remember every day that there are many people who died where I live. Like that, some of the things where I faced that have come for my life, and I am alive
mhm,
because through the grace of God and might of magic, my stuff was real, and
mhm,
theirs didn't have the necessary protections. Another thing that's important to remember: magic and mysticism are two different things. I'll repeat: magic and mysticism are two different things. Mysticism is concerned with a unitive experience with the divine. It is vertically focused, and it can produce magical effects as a byproduct, but it is not the same as magic. Magic is about power. Magic is amoral. Magic is
mhm,
essentially tech. It's about having power with, and even in cases over, reality or the physical order of the cosmos, or whatever you want to aim it at. And so when you have people that are like, "Oh, I did X, Y, and Z," a lot of times people will use the tools of mysticism, even religion, where religion is basically about whether you're right, or, in right standing with God, or whatever, your system is. They will use those tools and superimpose them and conflate them with magic, as opposed to, am I using this structure as a system that empowers and provides fuel that then I am hooking up tech to, that is producing effects. And I think that's
mhm,
important for people to know. It's the same thing as I run into where people are like, "Oh, I prayed for so and so, or I
mhm,
prayed for X, Y, and Z, and it didn't happen. So it must not be God's will." Well, you need to remember that between us as humans and absolute being, the source, there's a whole chain of causality. There's ancestors, there's angels, there's, terrestrial
saints.
spirits, there's saints, there's all kinds there's deities. Any one of them could have a vote and opinion. And if you don't have a sense of agency and power where you can decide for yourself, where you can move with power to change things and switch the lever, other factors, your ancestry, your past life momentum, all kinds of things are going to be deciding for you. So yeah, for me, when it comes to LARPing, a lot of times people don't have the right knowledge, but they think they
Mhm,
know. It's not what we don't know
yeah.
that harms us. It's what we feel we know for sure, and we
Mhm.
don't know that we don't know. So
Yeah, I think that's a really, really solid point. And I think also, to close us out, I need to say this is not in any way a dunk on people who are learning. Just because you're a beginner or you're learning something, or maybe you just discovered or just decided that this was a path you wanted to explore and follow, like that doesn't make you a LARPer. Everyone is new sometimes. I mean, I was a kid who deeply believed and felt and had experienced magic but didn't have a teacher. I was a kid in a Barnes and Noble. Alex and Joelle were both really fortunate in a way because they grew up in a sort of family setting where there was some understanding. In Alex's case, very much a training program almost from childhood of how to be a magician and how to be a magical person in the world. I didn't grow up with that, really. I mean, I had, some weird stuff, but I didn't have that same framework. So I was the kid in the Barnes and Noble getting, Silver Raven Wolf books and try to learn like how to do a magic. I was definitely a LARPer at a certain point in time. So this is not a dunk on anyone who is new or learning, but I think for me the difference between someone like that who is sincerely coming to a path and wants to explore and someone who I would say is LARPing, don't go in, don't enter the Coliseum like with a cardboard sword being like, I got it, you guys, I can fucking do it. It's like, no, let's pull it back. I mean, you can. if you want to, but the lion will eat you. The lion will eat you. So just, exercise a little bit of common sense and understand that if you are, newer to the game, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to know what you don't know. And I think at the point in time that you're really ready to perhaps bite off a little bit more, it's when you're ready to acknowledge that you don't know. I'll sit here all day and I tell the students in my Discord and Patreon server, there's so much I don't know. And thank God for that, because I love that I can learn more. I love that I can meet wonderful people like Jo'el and Alex, who I've been very fortunate, to know for a number of years now, and learn from them. I feel honored and thrilled that I have a community that I have managed to sort of accrue around me of people who are vastly more knowledgeable than me in so many different areas. And I think that that's the beauty. If you're someone who can acknowledge that you don't know everything, you're not a LARPer. You don't need to worry about it. If you're someone who's walking into the Coliseum with a cardboard sword, you need to check yourself,
Oh, hard agree. Hard agree.
So I would love to know, let us know where people can find you. Tell us what you're working on. Jo'el, I would love to pull you up first to tell us about what you got going on and where people can hunt you down.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Facebook, Jo'el Adifon. So that's JO'Eladifon. You can also find me at JO underscore the spell. That's JO underscore EL the spell, Jo'el the spell on Instagram. And I do rituals for clients, rituals that focus on blessing, healing, hexing, hex breaking, a whole wide range of things. So you can definitely find me on that and, help you out however I can.
Thank you so much. Alex, where can people find you? What are you working on?
So, got practicaloccult.com. We make magical treasures for discerning individuals. My business partner, Allison Chakosky, and I own that one. You want my shit? I'll teach you, get you laid, get you paid, get you even, get you some divination, get you all the good stuff. Allison will let you buy amazing magical treasures you've only seen in books that really, really work. You can find me on the Hexdoctor on Instagram. If Practical Occult is us, Hexdoctor's Practical Occult After Dark. It's a little spicier, a little bit. You got my hot takes. You got my pissing people off by being extremely based and correct about magic. That's that can be their thing. But you know what? You show up, you might learn something good.
Sure. Yeah, and both of these wonderful people do offer classes, courses. Alex has a lot on the Practical Occult website if you want to learn, but you don't necessarily want to take up his time one-on-one, although he does that too. Jo'el, your recorded class is still available, right? Your throwing hands, magical throwing hands.
Yep, I got I believe 3 or 4. One of the classes features Alex. That's magic is real as fuck. We got that one. We got throwing hands, which is a whole class that will teach you the ins and outs of essentially combat in the supernatural, how to protect yourself, how to fight back, and also how to go on the attack when you need to, because sometimes you need to.
Sometimes you gotta.
So we got that, and then we also have I believe, Alex, in the class that we have together, you have a whole section on divination, which is really, really, can't recommend that enough. He's one of the best diviners in the business. And we got a lot of cool stuff coming. And I got some future stuff in the works, but that'll be for later.
Follow Jo'el to keep up with what's going on. If you don't know me, which you might or you might not, you can find me on Celeste Mott, MOTT.com. It's got all of my stuff on there. I have a couple of recorded classes, one on love magic, one on dream magic, and I have some workbooks as well. I also have a Patreon Discord community that you can join. It's $5 a month. It's like a cup. It's a nice latte. You can get access to that space. We're a cool, chill group of people. Joel's in there. Alex is in there too. So it's a fun little spot to join. We're just a nice group of people learning together. And you can find me at Celeste Mott on Instagram. Instagram? That's a new thing that I just made up, but you can find me there. And Celeste Moth on TikTok, MOTH, because on TikTok someone had stolen my name. So yeah, thank you for. I know it's rough. It's rough, buddy. I should probably curse them. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna do that. Holy cow! Don't cancel me. Thank you for being part of this discussion. I appreciate you both so much for giving me your Thursday afternoon. And yeah, depending on how this goes, maybe we will loop on back in the future and do it again.
I'm here for it.
All right. Well, stay magical, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.